I'm the artist that is going to be guiding you through this paint night. I'll just a little bit about me. I'm actually living in Switzerland right now since the last time I did a paint night with you guys. So hopefully the connection is good, everything is good, but it's nighttime here. Great. So the pag that we are going to be decorating, here's one that I did as a little trial run, so I can just show you what it looks like, where it is, you know, how big you can expect the picture to be. So here's the bag itself, just a mountain in the night with the moon and either stars or snow. You can decide on that. And the pine trees on the snow. So not too hard, pretty easy. I'll give you a little rundown on the supplies that I am going to use, that we'll use. You really only need 3 colors, 1 paintbrush, a place to mix your paint. I'm using a sheet of aluminum foil, water to change colors if you only have 1 paintbrush, and a paper towel to dry off your brush if you're changing colors on the same brush. The 3 colors that I'm using and that you are likely using as well: white, dark blue, and dark green. And that should make it so that we can use the 6 colors that are in this design just by mixing up the colors, just the 3 colors. So I will point my camera to the bag so that you guys can follow along with me through the paint tutorial. So here is my bag. If you can see, there's like some light tracing that I've done already for myself, and it's only because I'm right over here and I don't want to give you a crooked picture for your video. So I've traced the picture myself. You're welcome to do that as well if you want, but you don't have to. It's a pretty simple tutorial. So I'll just go right into it. Feel free to shout out if anybody needs me to slow down. I tend to talk quickly and go really fast, so it's absolutely no problem. So the first thing that we're gonna do, actually the first 2 steps, these are gonna take the most paint out of the whole thing. So I'll show you how much paint I'm putting down when I do. The first thing that we're gonna do is the mountains. So the mountains are gonna be our lightest color blue in the picture. So I'm gonna take my white and blue and then put them on my mixing sheet, more white than blue. That will give us a light blue and a light enough blue so that we can use the other colors that are planned for the design. So I'll show you what I have down in just a second. So I'm just gonna mix, you can see like more white than blue. And I'll just take my my paintbrush, which I'm just using like a little flat brush, but really any brush will do. You can make it work. So I'll just mix those 2 colors together so that it is a light blue, so that if you painted white next to it, you could tell the 2 colors apart, and you have room for a middle color blue and a darker blue that won't all look like the same color. So my color right here just looks like a light blue, and it's really up to you where you want to put this on your canvas. You can make it really big, you can make it really small. I have mine sort of centered. The bottom of my bag is right here, the top of my bag is right here. So the top of my tallest mountain is going to be like a little bit over the middle line. So what I'm probably going to do is just do a little dot right here at the top of the mountain, and then do a little dot where I want the bottoms of the mountains to be, or a line, because it's ultimately going to be a line. So the easiest way that I think to keep your mountain symmetrical, we're just going to paint a triangle. So is to put a line down and then, you know, fill out your triangle shape. That's the tallest mountain. And you can just load up this brush with paint, because painting on canvas is a little difficult. Your paint doesn't go as far as it would if you're painting on paper. If you don't have to worry about having clean edges, because we're going to paint other colors nearby this edge where you can clean it out. But what I do if I want to make a cleaner edge with the paint is just make sure there's a lot of paint on my paintbrush, and paint side to side with a lot of paint, and then sort of use the rest of what's on my brush to just use up the rest, and then only paint the edges when I have a lot of paint on my brush. And if you have a wide brush, the hardest part's probably going to be the top of the mountain. And again, I'll just try to paint a little bit side to side, or just stamp a little mark so that I can make a point, and then paint down with as much paint as I can, and then try to just use the extra paint to fill in the inside. And it is going to take a lot of paint because the canvas, you know, sort of absorbs some of it, and it's rough textured. So
Hey,
it's
Katie,
gonna,
I don't know how I missed it. Are we painting all three or just the middle one right now?
oh, right now just the middle one, but I'm gonna just paint the sides next. So I'm just
Oh,
painting
good.
one.
Okay. I did all three and I just wanted to make sure I didn't ruin my thing already.
You know, if you know what you're doing and you know what it's
I
gonna look like,
definitely
just
don't.
paint away. But yeah, no, I'm starting with just one triangle in the middle, just so that you can see like it in the middle of the bag and where you're placing it and what the scale of the picture is gonna look like. So I'll just paint it. It's really the most important just to paint the top. And then you can get down to the bottom, but you can paint the bottom of all of the peaks together. So the design has 3 mountains, not just the top middle one. So how I'm going to paint the 2 side mountains is basically just pick a height that I want these 2 little peaks to be at on either side of the mountain, make a little dot, make another little dot, and then again, make a mark across so that you can see where the bottoms of these mountains are going to be, and then draw your line just so that it's parallel to the top big mountain. So just use that as your reference. If it's not parallel, it doesn't really matter. I think once we're done with this, you're going to be able to tell that it's a mountain either way. So really whatever shapes you like, but this is how I'm doing it. And just to keep things symmetrical, I just follow the line of that first peak. And if you're
Katie,
still,
can I just stop here for a second?
Sure.
I mean, I know Deanna is very knows how to do this, but for people who haven't before, I would just suggest putting a cardboard underneath in between your tote sides.
Yes.
If people didn't do that and they're like watching the Zoom, and then I also traced a circle onto our bags, just because I'm not good at freehand drawing a circle. So I would just say if people are starting to watch the Zoom on another time.
Definitely. You can definitely trace, especially since my background is a circle. Once we get into it, it really doesn't matter what shape you have in the background, like the design will be the same. But yeah, I agree. The first time I went through it, my circle was not even, it still turned out pretty good. So don't worry about it. But yeah, I do have cardboard inside my bag, especially because I have mine propped up and I'm painting it propped up. I believe last time I also had a piece of cardboard in my bag, even though I painted it. I've painted it flat and I've painted it propped up. So
yeah, last time I forgot my cardboard, even though we told everyone to put cardboard, and I cut cardboard for everybody, and I still forgot mine and it seeped through the bag.
Oh no!
Both sides of the bag.
Yeah, you definitely run the risk of doing that. I think I got my own bag just because I'm not near you guys last time, and it was a little bit thicker, so it was fine. So it definitely depends on the material, but this bag this time around that I got, it would definitely go through to the other side. So that's fine. And if your paint goes through one side, it'll stick the 2 sides together. You can get them apart, but that is what will happen. So even if you just put a piece of paper between, that would be probably better than nothing. But again, do not worry, it will be fine. If you are having problems with the texture of the canvas being really rough so that it's hard for you to do straight lines, I would advise adding, maybe just dipping your brush in water and then mixing the paint again so that it's a little bit thinner and it spreads easier. That's usually what I do when I feel like my paint is a little bit too thick. So I am painting my mountain peaks. the good thing about this is that usually white acrylic paint is pretty opaque, so we're not gonna have to do more than one coat of this. Some of the other steps, you may feel like you want to go back and clean some of it up at the end, but I didn't do it in my trial run and everything ended up fine. So I'm sure you guys will be fine as well. So this step takes almost, I think it's the second most amount of paint out of all of it. The most paint being the background, which is not that surprising. So all right, I have got my mountains, and this next step is going to take a while because it's so much paint and it doesn't require any special color mixing. So I'm going to move ahead. If you're not done, it's fine. We will catch up with each other. I'm just going to go in and start painting the background next. And that is just going to be the straight dark blue. So I finished my light blue peaks, the lightest blue color that we will be using here. 3 triangles next to each other. They can be tall, they can be short, they can be skinny, they can be fat. It will end up fine either way. And I'll move on to the background. The background is going to be the night sky. I just have my dark blue paint, nothing mixed into it, a decent amount of it, because it's going to take a bit of paint to cover this canvas. And the first thing that I'm just going to do with that dark blue paint is to start outlining the mountains that I had just painted. So just doing the edges of the mountains, because we want that part to dry first, because we're going to paint over that later. But also, because we're going to be outlining the mountains later, it's not super important to have a clean edge. So we're just going to put paint down around the edges of the mountain so that it dries faster than the rest of the sky, because acrylic paint dries pretty fast, especially on fabric. So we just want to get the paint down so that we don't have a lot of wet paint around the edges of the mountain later. Although that's totally fine. Because if the paint's wet, it'll just mix with the paint that we put on, and you can go back in and clean it up at the end if you want, or later after it's dried. That's something that can be done as well. When we get to the stars in the moon, or the snow in the moon, whichever you guys decide that you want it to be, you'll see that you can see a little bit through that paint, and you might want to go back in and clean it up. So you may do that with these edges as well. It will be easier if the rest of the paint is dry, but we're just going to hope that this dries by the time we get to that step. But if we paint the edges of the mountain now, by the time we do that and paint the rest of the sky and the outline, it will probably be dry in the first parts that we painted, which is why we're doing this. So that's great. So like I said about the outline, I did sketch a circle around the back of my little mountain with pencil, and I'm planning on painting over it whenever I do the outline. But I could see this design being cool if you just wanted to have like little sketchy outline, like no sharp lines, or if you wanted to do like a diamond, or if you wanted to do like star like points, like you can make the outline anything that you want it to be. And I think that it would still look cool with the mountain and the sky. So I'm doing a circle. I'll be leading you into doing a circle or an oval shape. But you can do whatever you want. And as you can see, if you like start with a lot of paint on your brush and you sort of flick out, it will fade away. So if you don't want a sharp line on your edge, you could do that and it would be pretty cool. I will not be doing that because I don't want to take the time to get it all even, but maybe you guys have more time than me. So I'll just be doing that. So first step, background sky. I've just outlined my mountains just in the hopes that this part of the painting will dry quicker than the rest of the sky. And so the next thing that I'm going to do, I'm just going to go ahead and do the whole outline and then color it in, just because that's the coloring in is least effort. So if I'm gonna do the outline of this as a circle, I've sketched the circle. So if you have also sketched a circle, you can just, you know, lightly sketch in the edges. And this edge, you should probably try to get as clean as you can for what you want it to look like at the end, because we're not going to be painting on the other side of the line. You can always go back in and clean up the lines at the end. And I'll show you how you can do that. And also another thing that I've done when I do fabric painting is you can even go back in if you're not happy with your edges, because sometimes it's hard to do a clean edge, especially on canvas. I've even gone in with a Sharpie, like a permanent marker, to clean up the edges, and that works as well. So if you're not happy with the way that your edges are turning out, you can always do that. So what I'm going to do, if you have not sketched it, is just mark a point where you want the top to be right above the mountain, and then mark the point on the edge of the mountain where you want the circle to go to. It can be right at the bottom, or it can be a little way up. I'm going to do it a little way up, and then sort of just do a little dotted line where you want your shape to be. And this definitely, as you guys mentioned, it can be difficult to get it symmetrical. So you can do it like this so that you can take a step back and decide whether you like that shape and make an adjustment however you want. And then just use your brush. Once you're happy with the shape that you have, just do a little side to side action to join your lines together and make it as smooth as you want it to be, because I mean, it would look great with a nice crisp edge, but it'll look great if you want to fan it out and sort of smudge out the edges as well, or change the shape from a circle to something else. It will be good. So I'm just going to work on that. This is definitely the longest step. So I'm going to try to, you know, take my time with this step so you guys feel like you have enough time to paint your outlines and color it in before we move forward. The only paint that is going to go over this later are the moon and the stars. And I don't mind. When I was doing this the first time, the paint was a little wet whenever I got to that step, and it was fine, because I think even with the wet paint, if it mixes with the white paint that we're going to put over it, because the moon and the stars are just going to be white paint, it still looked kind of cool, especially the moon. Like, it doesn't have to be fully flat white, because that's not what the moon actually looks like. So even with a little bit of paint like mixed into it, it still looked pretty cool. So still working on the outline. Just trying to get my wet brush like as much paint on it as possible just for these edges, and then sort of moving around the rest of the paint to fill in as much as I can. The paint does not go a super long way on this canvas, so if you're wondering if it's just you, it's not.
I added a lot, like more than I thought necessary, water to my paint, and it's like going on so nice now. So I highly recommend that to everyone.
That does help.
It was like a tablespoon of water to a tablespoon of paint. It was like a lot of water.
Adding the water definitely helps. I don't know if you guys have painted on like store-bought canvases before, but when you buy those are already primed with white paint. That's why they're so much easier to paint on. This is just like raw canvas, and it takes quite a bit of paint. So usually when artists are getting these raw canvases, they're priming them and painting on an already painted surface, not this surface. So I mean, this is fine because it's fabric painting, but it's usually not this hard to paint on canvas because it's usually primed with white, and I didn't even give myself enough paint. So I'm gonna have to put more paint. And as you can see, it looks pretty interesting right now, but we can trust the process. It'll look great at the end. Yeah, so we've painted now the lightest color blue that we're gonna paint, and then this is gonna be the darkest color. So yeah, I've got some dry paint action over here. And just try to, you know, smooth it out as much as you can. Again, if you're worried about the edge, don't be, I'm sure you guys are all painting these and looking really close. Maybe you're seeing some of the flaws in your painting, but if somebody's carrying this bag and you take a step back and look at it, it looks good. It'll look good. So you don't have to worry about that. So I have now finished my outline and I'm just filling some of that in. I'll take my time just so that everybody gets a chance to catch up on that. And this will be great. So while I'm filling this in, I can talk about some of the next steps that we're going to do. The step after this, we're just going to paint the snow under the mountain. It's like a really, really fast step because we don't even have any sharp lines. All the edges are either going to get covered up or they're going to be purposefully like soft edges. Unless you don't want them to be. Again, this is like a very tailorable design where, you know, the shapes of the mountains, the shapes of the outline, the shapes of the snow, where the trees go, where the stars and the moon go, you can really choose whatever you want. And if you have extra paint, you can even paint other stuff onto this design. Like you could paint like a cabin or like a shooting star or something, snowman. A lot of this would look cute. It's just like a pretty generic winter scene. So, wow, this is taking quite a bit of paint, but it's good. I am also getting in on the water paint. So yeah, you can see when I add the water to the paint, it looks a lot more, it flows a lot better. I'm almost done with this. I think last time I did this, I made the background a little bit smaller and that was fine. There was still plenty of room to fit the stars and the moon. So I'm just gonna try to finish filling this out. And then I can just go back in and see if there's any spots where the paint didn't take and just paint over it. Because it's really easy for the paint to just skip over some of that texture in the canvas. You can see through a little bit. It's great, just clean up some edges. Cool. Looks good. Looks pretty good. Now, how are you guys doing? Are you guys like close to filling in your background? Okay, cool. I'll just start getting ready to move on. Drop my napkin. So the next color that we're going to use is just straight white. So again, no mixing required. I'm just going to clean off my brush because when you have a dark color and you're using the same brush, you got to make sure all the paint gets cleaned out. So I'm doing that right now. And the next thing that we will be painting is just white. It's just going to be the ground. There's really no shape to this part at all. We're just gonna take some white paint, paint the outline of the bottom of the mountain in the middle, just in the middle. So just take the white, paint your little line. It's not important that this is a smooth line because most likely there will be trees in front of it later, so no one will even see it. They'll only see the edges of this. So paint a little bit in the middle, like this little line, maybe just under the peak of the big mountain. And then
I'm
take
still filling in my blue. Is everyone else also filling in blue or am I the slow one? We're all filling in blue. Okay. Sorry, I just want to slow you down, Katie.
No, that's totally fine. I'll just like go off and talk way too fast. It's totally fine. So I'll give you like a second to fill in your blue. It is a lot. So no, in this design we're just gonna have like the moon and some stars, but you can definitely add some fun stuff if you want later. but I can see the edges are already drying on mine. It'll dry quickly. And this step that you're doing with the background sky is the longest step. So after this, we're gonna have we're probably more than halfway done. Maybe we're halfway done, I don't know. Because this is like the majority of the paint that we're putting on here. So if you guys want to let me know when you're finishing up with the blue, I'll just like redo the start of the white intro, and then go through that because it's going to be super fast. I don't want to go all the way through the step and go to the next one before you guys are there yet. Great. So should be a beautiful not Christmas scene, winter scene. You can add Christmas things if you want, or any holiday that you want, but this is just going to be a snowy mountain. Maybe like the Swiss mountains that are here, which I haven't seen. I just moved to Switzerland in September, and you can see the Alps like pretty close. We're in a valley, but in the winter this like gloom sets in September, and then the clouds just don't go away until spring. So I haven't seen the sun in like over a week and I definitely haven't seen the mountains. So I'm actually hoping that we can drive up to see the Alps during this vacation, and maybe it will look like this bag. So no, it'll be great. I'm excited. So how are you guys doing on your background?
I just finished mine. Did your kids go skiing yet, Katie?
No,
They were gonna.
but did buy skis and we're gonna try to go. They're 2 and 4. I don't know how to ski, so this sounds like a dangerous endeavor for all of us. Like just not maybe a bad idea, but we're gonna try to go because little kids learn how to ski here. So it'll be good. All right. So for the ground, it's just gonna be a snowy ground, super simple. I just have like some white paint on here, not mixed with anything. This is the lightest color in the design. So the first thing that I did was just to trace the edge of the mountains just under the large mountain part. And then once I've done that, I'm gonna try to sort of make a shape for the snow that is solid white in this-ish area, but then sort of feathers out to the edge in a more ambiguous shape than this solid circle. So I'm just going to take a decent amount of paint on my brush and then go right on that line, like right in the middle, and then sort of just brush down until I run out of paint. And that'll happen pretty fast on the canvas. And then if I want it to go a little further, I'll just keep tracing that line until it goes as long as I want it to go, but it'll be opaque at the top, and then it'll just sort of fade out onto the edges. And I'm going to use that to just be a line to start doing that from side to side. So take a decent amount on my brush, go to this line, and then just pull that paint across, and then try to pull it, almost as far as the mountains go. And I can finish outlining some of that, but I sort of want to outline the bottom in the same way. It doesn't matter if that outline gets kind of muddled up, because again, you're going to just paint trees in front of it. So the result is going to sort of just be this snowy ground, and then it just kind of fades out on the edges. And then I'm going to make it get closer to the middle as I go down. And then just like keep pulling it out just so that it's a little faded, but it's like sort of kind of a little semicircle-ish shape. If you want to do just a solid circle on the bottom and trace whatever shape that you've made, you can totally do that. It won't make a difference with the design. This is just a little fun, little mix up the technique and the painting. So we're just going to try to fade some of this out. And it doesn't have to be super even. If you see some spaces that are getting skipped consistently that you want to have filled in, and then you can just sort of do the same on the bottom, where you just make it so that it's not a solid line. And then it looks like that. So that I like the way that turned out. So I'll just do the same thing on this side. where I'm just pulling that paint over. It might take a couple dips even for the same line to pull that paint as far as you want it to go. But we're just gonna do that for both sides. And that's gonna be all that we do in this step. So just continuously go over in the same direction to smooth it out and just pull that paint out into the sides of the canvas. And yeah, if you can just keep going over it, you can adjust the shape as much as you want. You just want to make sure that it's, if you're doing this effect, that it's like the dry edge, and then just finish it out however you feel like doing it. I'm just going up towards the bottom and just brushing around, sort of like out and around. I think I might bring this one a little farther, but we're just gonna do that, and that will be the ground. And then after that, we can go into the next step. I mostly just want to prolong the amount of time before we move to the next step, because we're gonna be painting right on the edge of the mountain next, and I just want to give the paint a little chance to dry while we're doing this. But yeah, it'll just give you, you know, the suggestion of the shape so that it's making a circle, for mine at least, but whatever you want. So I'm just gonna finish that up and clean my brush. So how are you guys doing on that? Are you guys getting to the end of it? Good, ready to move on, almost. So I'll just go ahead and move on to the paint mixing of the next color. The next color is going to be our medium blue. And what I'm probably going to do, because I have leftover paint from the mountain and the sky, is I'm just going to mix those two together. But another thing you can do is you can just mix the same amount of blue and white, or maybe just dark blue with a little bit of white. Either one is fine, just as long as you can see the contrast between the sky and this color and the mountain. So I'm just going to mix the blues that I have to make sort of a medium blue. If it looks like it's right, I might have to mix a little bit more blue into it. I just want to be able to see the contrast. So I'll show you what my color looks like whenever I get to the conclusion. You don't need a ton of paint for this, because we're kind of just doing a line on the mountains. So mountains and the peaks on the mountains. So I'm just gonna have this medium blue, and you can see it's like light enough that it won't blend in with the sky, and it's dark enough that it won't blend in with the mountain. Just gonna take a second and clean my brush. Essentially all we're doing for this step is outlining the mountains, just to give it a little emphasis with an outline. So you can start doing that. I will start doing that in a moment. I'm just cleaning off my brush. You can make this line as thick or as thin as you like. I'm gonna try to make mine on the thin side, just kind of make my brush as sharp as I can and put not too much paint on there, and just sort of drag it down. You can go back and forth. You can sort of use your brush to stamp the outline and then smooth out, like stamp it if you want to do that, if you want it to be really thin, and then smooth it out. It doesn't have to be super distinct, but it's just a good, it's a good way to make a uniform line between the two colors, because we didn't really focus on creating too clean of a line last time. This is one of the steps that you can definitely go in and fix up later if it doesn't turn out the way you want it. Making these thin lines on this surface is really hard, for me at least. So I am just gonna try to be gentle. If you're seeing that your background is mixing in with this color, it's totally fine. You can either just go back through it again, like just finish it and then go back in, and it may have dried a little more. Or you can just, make it artistic and leave it blended. That will be fine as well. So just trying to be really careful, make it as clean of a line as I can.
Is that light blue or is that dark blue?
This color that I'm painting right now should be a medium blue, somewhere in between the two. I don't even know, like maybe my picture is too small. It might not even be showing up on the camera very well. It's like a middle color between these two. So this bottom color was like mostly white, a little blue. This is just straight blue. And then this little outline detail is just going to be like equal parts white and blue. So just sort of middle. It's lightish. Mine's kind of light. I probably could have made mine a little bit darker. And this is mainly for the purpose of cleaning up the lines between the mountains and the sky. So if you're like amazing and made it beautiful the first time around with just the two colors, you don't have to do this. But I'm also going to use this color to add a little bit of the like mountain peak detail. So I think I'm like pretty happy with this outline. And I'm going to go in and like, you know, the snow-capped peaks that you see in animations or drawings of mountains, we're just going to do that where we're just making this little shape at the top of the mountain and then coloring it in.
Can I do that, Mark?
Mm-hmm.
Wait, is you
Hang on, I just need a little more paint. Let me just finish this edge and then you can have it. Okay.
Yeah.
Answer.
All right, so I'll do that on all three mountains. Depending on how big you made your mountains, it might not like, it might be a little small of a detail, but I think in the end it'll look good. So you can see I did my big mountain and then my little mountain, and I'm just doing these snow caps. You can do them however you like. I'm sort of just doing them in like the generic, like sketch a mountain type of way. But if you're more and add more like that. So I think I'm happy with that. And by now, I think the paint on the peaks are probably mostly dry, depending on how much.
For a sec, I'm still outlining.
Oh yeah.
Sorry.
That's totally fine. This is the second time I've done it, so maybe I'm just super fast. No, that's fine. It's hard to get that straight line with the paintbrushes, especially, I mean, like my paintbrushes are fine, they're not that nice, but it's definitely hard to get that clean edge. So you can use water, you can just be careful and continuously go back and forth to build up that paint on the layer between the mountain and the sky, and the effect will be quite nice. And
I missed it. Will you tell us how to do the peaks again?
the peaks. So I'm just doing like a zigzag line, like it's just like a big zigzag line. You can choose however far down you want it to go, but I kind of did mine like halfway, like the halfway mark on my biggest mountain. And then if you want it to be symmetrical, you can just make a little dot, make a V, and then bring the edges of the V down on either side to the edges. So you kind of have like a little point, and then do the same thing on those two. Just basic zigzag line. But yeah, I usually start with the middle and then go down. And then just color in that area between the outline and where you did the cap. So when normally the mountain cap would be white covered with snow, this design has it darker just so that you can see it. And we're using white elsewhere in the painting. So if you wanted to, you could paint it white. But at this point, I think the background's still a little wet. So if we had gone in with white paint, it would have ended up blue anyway. So. All right. So if you are done with this step, you can just clean off your brushes because we're going to be moving out of the blue family of colors after this. So we will be making a little bit of a change in what we're painting going forward. We're going to move on to the trees. Exciting. All right. How are you doing with your snow peaks? Going well?
2 out of 3 done.
Great. All right. Excellent. So yeah, everything should be kind of starting to get a little drier. There'll still be wet spots. But the acrylic paint does dry really fast on the canvas. The next color that we're going to be mixing is going to be a light green. So if you want to get your green out, and we use 3 shades of blue here, light, medium, and dark. We're only going to use 2 shades of green. So you can make the green however light you want. You can make it really light if you want to. You can just mix it with a little bit of white if you want to. Either will be fine. We just need to be able to differentiate between your tube of green and then a lighter shade of green. So you can just put some, I'll just mix a little bit of green now, and I'll show you what color I'm getting, and then we will move on to there's background trees and then foreground trees. Don't have to do that, but I think it'll end up great on the bag. So I'm gonna paint a little background green color. I'll show you what it looks like. We're only painting 3 background trees. So again, this is not going to be very much paint. We've already put most of the paint on the bag at this point because we have the whole background painted. Like there's not going to be any more paint on raw canvas at this point. We're just going to be painting on paint. So my light green this time around looks like this. It's not that light. It's actually pretty medium green. I'll show you from my original bag. I actually made it a lot lighter, so that could be fine as well. That's like just a lighter green. We're going to paint these 3 background trees. So
I'm sorry, we're starting with the light green or the dark green?
Light green first. So mix your green with a little bit of white or a lot of white, whatever you like, whatever color you're into, for your background green. We're going to be using a light green and a dark green for the whole design. So we only need 2 greens. So it really doesn't matter. If you want to make it really light, that's fine. If you want to make it just a medium green, it'll still have enough contrast to show up the way that we want it to. So what I'm going to do with these background trees is I'm going to do 3 trees right under the largest peak of the mountain. So I'm going to show you one of the trees and then I'll do 2 more, 1 on either side. So the first thing I'm going to do is, for me, I'm going to pick a point like kind of where the mountain meets the other peaks, but like halfway up, and then just like do a line down, draw a line down, have that line go a little bit, like maybe like a brush length or so into the snowy ground, and then turn it into an upside down T, like a little one, like a skinny T, and then turn it into a triangle, take the bottom of the upside down T or the top of the upside down T and bring the color down to the sides. It's not really important that the tree is very pointy. So like that little detail, you can do it or you don't have to. It's just like a rough triangle, but we're going to turn it into a tree. So we're going to add more to this. So I'm just going
Katie, is this your pure green or this is your mixed green?
This is a mixed green. Okay. So a lighter shade than what you have in your tube. So this is what is in my tube. And then I mixed a little bit of white with it. And that's what I'm painting with now, is the green mixed with white. So I have this lovely, I feel like you can already tell it's going to be a tree, but you can take more of the same color paint. And then, so I have a flat brush. You might have a round brush or like a little pointy brush. With my flat brush, I'm just going to take, make it angled a little bit and then sort of stamp it on the side of the tree so that it's like this. If you have a straight brush, you can kind of make like a little swoop from the top down to this little top branch. And then you're going to just keep doing it down the tree where you put your brush next to the last swoop and then just swoop it down, last swoop, swoop it down, last swoop, swoop it down. Whoop. If it doesn't look right, just do it again. Or stamp it, last swoop, swoop it down. And then there's half of the tree. And then I'm just gonna do the same thing with the other side. It's just like a nice little fir tree. My edges aren't super sharp. Doesn't really matter because I think it still gives the same effect. Like even if you sort of like fan it out on the end, it just looks like there are more branches. So essentially that's the tree shape that we're going to be doing multiple times. I'm just going to do 3 for this background because we're going to do like some little darker ones in the foreground wherever you guys want. The last thing to do with the shape is just sort of boop down a trunk. We're just going to keep it in green. This one and the ones in the background will probably end up getting covered up. So it's just a good practice to do the Christmas tree shape so you can do them again whenever you're doing the foreground. So I'm just going to do 3 trees in the background. They can be the same height, they can be different heights. I just like to have them kind of in the middle, but it's not really important where they go, so you can put them wherever you want. But I'm basically just going to do all that again. I'll just do the lines where I want the trees to go now, and then paint them in the same way that we did before, just triangle, and then like turn that triangle into a little more detailed triangle, and then it looks like a tree, which is great. And feel like it doesn't have to be exact because the fact that it's green triangles in a mountain next to a mountain at night, like, you know, it's a tree. So it can be an abstract tree or an exact tree, whatever you like or whatever you can do. So I'm just gonna turn it into, add the little branches and add the trunks. A little harder to do it facing away. And no more detail needed really for these background trees. I think I mentioned earlier that if you guys have more time or more paints or more just interest in making the drawing a little more detailed, you can add like some little snowy lines on the trees if you want to make it look like the trees have snow on them. But I would do that after the paint dries, and I'm not going to do it when I'm guiding you through this, but it's definitely something that you can add without too much effort, and it would be really cute. So I've got my 3 background trees. And again, they can be really anywhere. I like them centered because in the next step, when we go in again with darker trees, they're sort of just going to go all over the place. They're not going to go in any specific locations. So I like the background ones to sort of be symmetrical when the other ones aren't going to be. So I'll let you guys finish up those trees. The next trees will just be the shade of green that you have in the tube, or the darker green if you're using other colors. I will just clean off my brush and get ready for that step that we can go through together. These trees are pretty simple. Look good. I'll fill in some of the areas where I feel like the paint didn't really go through. Most of these trees are gonna end up getting covered up by the foreground again. You're probably only gonna be able to see like the top halves of them because we're gonna be painting trees in front of the background trees. And I'm noticing as my paint is drying, and you might as well as you're painting, that you can see, and maybe you can't see it in the video, but I can see it up close, that some of the paint, there's some spots where some paint hasn't really taken on some of the canvas. This is really easy. Like, this whole design could benefit from a second coat of paint, like in every part, but it will be fine. Like, again, like even in the background showing through in the canvas, we're going to paint foreground stars. These could, you know, easily be background stars, or you can go over and clean it up at the end. But but I think it looks good. How's it going on the background trees? Good, pretty good, great. All right, so not the last thing, this is the second to last color that we will be using, is going to be these foreground trees. Now you can see in my first go around, I have quite a few of them. So we're just going to go through with the color in the tube, and so I have my dark green paint. Here's the light green that I just painted with. Here's the color in my tube. You can see that the color in the tube is quite a bit darker, or just dark enough that you can tell the difference between the two colors. That's really all you need. And we're going to paint the trees the same way that we did with the background trees. I would recommend that these trees be a little bit smaller, maybe about half the size as the background trees, just so that you can still see the background trees. But you can paint the trees one at a time. What I'm going to do is paint them, mark where they're going to be first, and then paint the tree. So I'll take some of the darker green paint. I'll make a line over here because I want a tree to be right here. I'll make like 2 lines here. They can go wherever you want. In my original drawing for this design versus the first bag that I did just to make sure that the design turned out okay, I did not have the trees in the same place. It doesn't matter where you put them. Let's say do like 5 or 6. And then, so now I know where they're going to be. And so now I'm going to do each tree individually. So we'll do it the same way that we did the background trees, where I'm just going to draw that line. That's how tall I want it to be. Then turn it into a little upside down T triangle. I noticed with my paint personally, and it definitely depends on which pigments you guys are using, like what types of paint you guys are using. My darker green paint is much more transparent than whenever I mix it with white. So just if you notice that, it's not a problem. When I did this, I ended up kind of going over my triangle with an additional sort of coat of paint, just so that I couldn't see really defined shapes behind the paint, and that was good enough. And then whenever I started doing more of the texture of the leaves, having a more transparent paint actually kind of gave you more of that branch texture anyway, so it ended up looking good. So don't worry if you're thinking that if your paint that is darker is sort of showing through. Also, don't worry if as I'm experiencing with this tree, some of the paint from the background tree is mixing with my paint as I'm painting it. Just go slowly. You can put a lot of paint on your brush so that it doesn't pull any of the background paint if you're experiencing that. Or you could just, paint over it a bunch of times so it mixes the paints together, because ultimately it will mix to a darker shade with your darker paint that you have on your brush. Either way, it is not a big deal. You can also, if you want, like wait between steps until your paint is dry. I just don't think that it's necessary to, you can still finish it without waiting for the paint to dry. Like it will end up being fine. So I'm just turning all of these trees into triangles over here. Again, it really does not matter at all where your foreground trees are, just as long as they're covering up some of the background trees. I think that the design will be fine. Mine are not symmetrical. Yours also do not have to be symmetrical. Even the triangles don't have to be symmetrical. I think as long as you sort of get those branches and the trunks, it becomes pretty clear what you are painting. So these fir trees right here. So yeah, it doesn't matter if your paint seems a little clear or you can see like the brush marks, because actually with the trees, I feel like this works in our favor anyway. Like if I'm just stamping these on and I can see the outlines of my stamps, it sort of looks like the branches and just adds more detail than I even intended to paint. So it's cute. And if you can even like add more, you know, texture to your trees if you want, if you're experiencing that. I might be the only one, because we're probably using different paints. It was actually hard for me to find paints here because they don't have craft stores, which is a tragedy. But I was able to find some eventually at a department store. But it seems like the same paint, so it doesn't really matter. Still found it. Yeah, I'll just sort of add those shapes. And like I said in the last step, if you have time and you want to, after the paint has dried, you can sort of add snow to the tops of the branches, as if it had just snowed. That would be cute. Or just like do another coat, or like you could go back into the background and add like more of a medium green shade to give more definition to the branches, but it's not necessary if you don't want to. I think that the shape of the tree in itself is enough to give the effect that you're looking for. So I'm just gonna finish some of these. I have one more to go. And I need to do all the stems as well. So definitely no rush. You can, you know, do your own thing on where you want things to go with this design and the trees. I actually just got my Christmas tree today, so that was fun. But these are just fir trees in the forest. Okay, so I'm gonna do the stems of mine. And that will be that on that. So as you can see, I sort of did like each step across all of the trees, but you can sit and finish each one separately if you want. It really doesn't matter. The result is the same at the end. I'll just keep sort of finessing these. How's your foreground trees? Are you guys good? Great. All right. I'll move on to the last step then, which is the moon and the stars, or the moon and the snow, whichever you feel like your painting looks like. And it's just going to be white. So I'll start us off with the moon. I'm going to put some white paint on the just white, straight white paint. I'm going to do a full moon. You can do whatever you like. Make a little circle. Again, you can see the little bit of canvas texture coming through. This also, you may notice either your paint may be wet where you're painting over this, or you may be able to see through a little bit from the white to the dark blue, like it's not showing up completely white. I think that if you take your paintbrush and you sort of stamp it a little bit like this so that you're sort of stippling it, it gives you almost like the texture of the actual moon. So if you're seeing a little bit of see-through, you can use that to your advantage so that there's like a little bit of dark spots that looks actually more like the moon than if you just did a white circle, although a white circle is also fine. And then after you do that, we're going to do the stars or the snow. And I'm just going to take rather than the brush end, the back end of the paintbrush, and just dip that in the white and then stamp it onto the sky in any pattern you like. If you know any constellations, you could do a constellation if you want them to be stars. I can't decide whether I want mine to be stars or snow. I feel like the circles kind of look like snowflakes, but it also, you know, is giving us night sky over here. So And then just really as many or as few as you want. If you're not getting the stamp that you want, you can go back over it. You can go heavy paint for a big star, really light paint, or like heavy paint, and then just like do a little teeny tiny tap for a little tiny star. And once you're done with that, you're done with the whole thing. And you can go back in and clean up your lines if you want, but it's fine as is. I think I'm gonna be done with that. So